Good evening. I'm Phil Rogofsky, founder and the executive director of the Maryland STEM Festival. The healthcare field has always been driven by technology, and it seems that the pace of the impact of technology on the healthcare industry has been expanding and increasing greatly. So tonight we'll be talking about some advances, some very important and interesting advances in the healthcare field that is being driven by technology. We have a esteemed panel here who will be talking about different areas that they are working in, and we will start with Madhava Gubi from Johns Hopkins University, who will be talking about a very interesting topic. And I will turn the floor over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. I'm just going to start by sharing my screen. All right. Can someone just confirm that my screen is visible?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Madhava Gubi. I'm a graduate student with Dr. Muinat Bell at the Johns Hopkins University, and I'm here to talk about our work on tracking needle tips during surgical procedures using robotic arms, deep learning, and photoacoustic imaging. Let's start with a simple question. Why do we want to track needle tips? To answer that, let us consider the liver biopsy procedure shown on the right. In this procedure, a doctor must insert a special needle called a biopsy needle into a patient's liver to extract a tissue sample. To keep the patient safe, it is important for the doctor to know the position of the needle tip and its surroundings at every moment. To obtain this information, we typically rely on a medical imaging technology called ultrasound. An ultrasound probe is placed in contact with the patient. The probe emits a sound pulse and receives the echoes from the patient's body. An ultrasound scanner, which is not shown here, then processes these received echoes to form an ultrasound image, such as the one shown on the right. The doctor then uses these ultrasound images to view the needle tip and its surroundings and guide the needle to the biopsy site. While ultrasound imaging has multiple advantages, the system shown here has a few limitations. First, viewing the needle tip is more difficult in obese patients. That's a problem because 42.5% of US adults qualify as obese. Next, as the needle tip moves inside the patient body, the ultrasound probe must be manually moved to keep the needle tip in the image. This leads us to the following two questions. First, is there a better imaging method than ultrasound? And second, can the tracking task be automated? As you might have guessed, the answer to both of these questions is yes, as we'll see on the next slide. The setup shown here is similar to what we saw on the previous slide. We have the same needle, probe, and ultrasound scanner, which was not visible on the previous slide. Instead of the patient body, we have what's called a phantom, which we use for testing purposes to mimic the properties of tissue. Now, instead of transmitting a pulse of sound from the probe, we're going to add a light source to our system. An optical fiber is inserted into the hollow core of the needle and connected to a laser. The laser is then pulsed at a fixed wavelength, heating the surrounding environment, causing thermal expansion. The thermal expansion results in a pressure wave, which propagates across the phantom and is received by the probe. The ultrasound scanner then converts these received pressure waves into a photoacoustic image shown here. Note that the photoacoustic image contains only the needle tip and not the shaft of the needle, which was visible in the ultrasound image on the previous slide. Finally, to track the needle tip as it moves, we attach the probe to a robot arm shown here. We refer to this entire system as a photoacoustic visual servoing system. This video shows a demonstration of our photoacoustic visual servoing system. We see the same optical fiber and hollow core needle that we saw on the previous slide. The needle tip is inserted into ex vivo bovine liver tissue. The probe is mounted on a robot, which moves to center the probe above the needle tip. When the robot is manually moved away from the needle tip, it first moves the probe to search for the needle tip and then centers the probe once again. The system does this using the input photoacoustic images that you see on the right. The brightest points in the image are identified, and the needle tip is segmented from these regions. Once the needle tip is visible, the probe is moved to bring the needle tip to the center of the probe, marked by the green line here. The system shown in the previous video has multiple advantages, including a high frame rate and resolution, which allows for precise tracking of the needle tip. However, the system has a few limitations. First, to track the needle tip, the system depends on identifying the brightest spot in the input image as the needle tip. As a result, this amplitude-based approach often fails in the presence of acoustic reflectors, such as bone. In addition, the system requires a two-step process of forming a human interpretable image and segmenting the needle tip from the resulting image. Naturally, this leads us to our next question. Can we leverage deep learning, to overcome these limitations? Once again, as you might have guessed, the answer to this question is yes. We developed the visual surveying system shown here to compare our previous two-step amplitude-based approach with our novel deep learning-based approach. In both cases, the process begins with an ultrasound probe acquiring a frame of raw sensor data shown here. In the approach we saw in the previous video, this raw sensor data is then converted into a human interpretable image, and the needle tip is segmented from the resulting image. In our deep learning-based approach, a convolutional neural network estimates the position of the needle tip directly from the raw sensor data, as you can see here. In both cases, the estimated position of the needle tip and the confidence score of that estimate are then provided to a finite state machine, which computes a commanded velocity for the robot arm to center the probe above the needle tip. This video shows a demonstration of our deep learning-based system. The setup shown here is similar to that of the previous video, with an ultrasound scanner, laser, and robot. Zooming in, we see the same optical fiber, hollow core needle, and ultrasound probe as in the previous video. Instead of the ex vivo tissue, we used a phantom for this demonstration. Now, instead of a photoacoustic image, what we see here is a frame of raw sensor data acquired by the probe. The needle tip is represented by this waveform here. This frame is then provided to a convolutional neural network, which identifies the needle tip using the green box that you see here. As the needle tip is moved away from the probe, watch how the green box moves to track its position. The finite state machine then uses the center of the green box to command the robot to recenter the probe above the needle tip. This graph shows the needle tip tracking errors of our amplitude-based and deep learning-based approaches, represented by the solid and striped bars respectively in the phantom and ex vivo tissue. The key thing to note here is that a lower error is better. We can see that we have high errors for the amplitude-based approach in both environments, which is bad. However, these errors can be reduced using our novel deep learning-based approach. To conclude, we demonstrated an integrated deep learning-based photoacoustic visual surveying system. Our deep learning-based approach improved upon our previous amplitude-based approach with reduced needle tip tracking errors. The system demonstrated here has the potential to be extended to track catheter tips and other surgical tool tips. I would like to thank my advisor, Dr. Bell, undergraduate student Jessica Su, and other members of the Pulse Lab where I work. Thank you for listening, and I would be happy to take any questions.
Yes. How far along is this for being in practical use in hospitals and doctor's office?
That's a good question. Thank you for that. So there are still multiple factors that we need to consider. So for example, when it comes to photoacoustic imaging, we have a laser which is often inserted into, for which the intended use case is to insert the laser into the patient body. So there we need to consider what an acceptable laser energy level would be to keep the patient safe. So that's one of the things that we're considering, that we're working on right now. On the robotic side, there's still more work to be done regarding tracking the needle tip in different dimensions. So the system that's demonstrated here is really good at tracking the needle tip across that one dimension when it's moving right in the imaging plane of the probe. But when you have something, what's called an elevational offset, there's there's other algorithms that need to be developed to improve the ability of the system to track needle tips in that dimension. So I would say there's still quite a bit of work to be done to translate it to a clinical setting right now, but I would say it shows great promise for them.
Well, that's good to hear. How long has the project been going on? How long has it been under development?
So it's kind of the culmination of multiple smaller projects. So we've had 3 students in the Pulse Lab who worked on various aspects of this, 3 graduate students, and then a couple of undergraduate students as well. So I would say if you want to add up all the time put together, it would probably be about 5 years or so, 5 or 6 years. I've been working on it for the last 3 years.
Well, thank you very much. This is very interesting, and can't wait for it to be used in clinical use, because this sounds very exciting.
Thank you.
Our next presenter is James Drain. James is with the company is ATINC, correct?
That's kind of our shorthand. Anthrotronics is the,
okay.
Yeah.
And where is Anthrotronics based?
We're based in Silver Spring, Maryland.
All right. Well, it is. I will turn over, and you'll be talking about a product or an item called Dana.
Dana, yeah.
Dana. All right. Please explain.
All right. Thanks, Phil. Let me share my screen real quick. All right. Yeah, so hi, everyone. My name is James Drain. As Phil said, I work for a company called Anthrotronics, and I am by training a mechanical engineer, and I am also the technical lead for the Dana product itself. And yeah. So Dana is in short, it's a mobile app for iOS and Android, and it's what's called a mobile cognitive assessment tool, and it is an FDA cleared mobile device. About 7 or 8 years ago, the FDA started governance or regulation of mobile health tech mobile apps started falling under the FDA. So we had to go through an FDA clearance process in order to Dana itself, it has 2 types of tests that someone can self-administer to themselves. So one form is our cognitive tests, and these are more kind of game-like tests that you just try to respond as quickly as possible. The bullseye screenshot there that you can see on the screen is from the simplest test, which is called simple reaction time, and the stimulus shows up in the same part of the screen every time, but sometimes it jumps on you, and sometimes there's a long delay. So you just have to kind of respond as quickly as possible. There's some other tests, other cognitive tests that tie in other domains of cognition, like memory or spatial processing, recall, things like that. But basically looking at response time. Then the second type of test that is within Dana are psychological questionnaires. And so these look at behavioral factors like sleep or mood or depression or things like that can definitely have a direct effect on your cognition. Now Dana is super sensitive to measuring cognitive performance. but it's not specific. And by that I mean, it can tell you if something has changed in your cognitive performance, but it won't tell you necessarily why. Now that is can be super useful to researchers or clinicians, but potentially, so if they see something's going on, they might use another tool to kind of dig deeper, to kind of figure out why. So I kind of broke things down, playing with the STEM algorithm, or the acronym, into the 4 domains there. So while developing Dana, and currently we still are ongoing, have conducted a lot of research. So early on, we collected data with thousands and thousands of US service members in some harsh, extreme environments to kind of, do some feasibility testing. So we went to Greenland and Bolivia for altitude, and Japan for humidity, California for heat, and we went on to the USS George Washington in the Pacific Ocean, which was quite a trip to test with sailors at sea there. And yeah, we continue our research projects with Dana currently. Coincidentally, we're doing a project with Johns Hopkins University presently, looking at COVID's effects on cognition. We don't have any results quite yet for me to share with you, but it's quite an interesting project. So on the technology side, there's lots and lots of mobile device testing that's involved, primarily in our quality assurance system, which is crucial to maintaining a well-functioning product. And both on the hardware and the software side. So as many of you are probably aware, there are thousands and thousands of different Android devices. Each one is slightly different, and new devices and features and gadgets are coming out all the time. And similarly on the software side, so each time iOS and Android comes out with a new release, it has its own kind of features and bells and whistles and requirements that we have to pay attention to and kind of test out, each version, internal version of Dana before we launch to the App Store or the Play Store. On the engineering side, one key point is we do latency testing to kind of test out the latency or the delay in timing response for different devices. And so this is one stipulation of our FDA approval, FDA clearance, is that we need to keep the delay characteristics within a certain level, within a certain threshold. So we do testing with different versions of Dana, different versions of iOS and Android, and different mobile devices. And so we figured out a way to kind of emulate a capacitive touch somewhat instantly using just a high capacitance load that emulates the kind of capacitance that a human body has. And so it's all kind of controlled via circuitry and a microcontroller, and so lots of engineering went into, and trial and error is a big part of engineering, but lots of engineering went into designing that. On the math front, app development, as many of you probably realize, that programming equals lots and lots of math. So all the time working with different numbers and variables, sorting them, figuring out, are they even or odd, or what's the size of this this matrix, or all kinds of stuff, just to move different variables and data around in order to make sense of them, and to keep them organized and in a database, or moving around between the server and the apps, or moving around into different results screens. Yeah, so lots and lots of math involved there, for sure. Oh yeah, and now hopefully I can do a quick demo and share my screen real quick. Let me see if I can do that. From my iPhone here.
Yeah, I just downloaded and it's asking me for a user ID and a password. How do I get that?
Oh yeah, I would have to get you set up with the
Okay.
with the user. Yeah, it's you just have to have a an account. All right, let me. How do I share? No, I'll just share. My whole screen. Huh, it's not letting me share my entire screen. Well, maybe I can, while the next person goes, try to figure that out. But technical difficulties.
All
Sorry
right.
about that.
That's okay. Well, it's a very interesting product, and I'm looking forward to giving it a run. So we'll be turning the program over to Stephen, and if you can get it to work, we are happy to go back to you. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, James. All right, now I'm introducing Stephen Porter. Your company, Stephen, is called Keytronics.
My company is called Keytech. We're in Baltimore City.
Okay, so you're going to be talking again about technology and healthcare, so I will turn the program over to you. Thank you, Stephen.
Yes. So let me share my screen. Can you all see PowerPoint?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So I'm representing Keytech. I'm an electrical engineer here. And what Keytech does is high-tech product development, specifically medical devices. We're a team of engineers primarily working on lots of medical device challenges. So recently, in the last few decades, medical technology has gotten extremely complex. And technology has also advanced enough that we can fit a lot into a very small space and put a lot of computing power behind it. So Keytech has built a team that is very good at turning ideas from scientists into products that become a reality and can be used by hospitals, patients at home, doctors' offices, etc. So this image is just one tiny example of how complex medicine is getting. This is a very close-up image of fluid in a microfluidics chamber that does DNA extraction and analysis. So this is on the scale of a few millimeters that we're looking at. And it involves a ton of mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, and computer engineering to make this happen and work the way the scientists intend. So, as I indicated, KeyTech is built of engineers of those disciplines. We have industrial designers, mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, computer engineers, and technicians who all work together to build really complex devices. This is an example of a few of the clients that we've worked with. So there are a lot of recognizable names on here. And the work we do for them allows the ideas that come out of the R&D departments of these companies to become a reality, because KeyTech is really good at working quickly and working interdisciplinarily to create these products that a larger company might not have the know-how to do. So this is how the process normally works. A scientist might have an idea that they think has applicability in the world somehow, helping patients. So they might come to KeyTech and ask for help turning an idea that they might have spent years on and at the moment might take cubic yards of space in their laboratory. KeyTech has to figure out how to turn that into a product that's safe and reliable, does the job, and can be sold on the market. So we come back with prototypes, help them get manufactured, and then once the scientist is okay with what we've come up with, once they know that it meets their requirements, we can send it on to use in the real world. KeyTech fundamentally is a product design firm, and that means that we don't normally come up with the idea that we're building, and we aren't normally the ones who actually build it in mass production. We do everything in the middle. So we have to take that great idea and figure out how to turn it into a real product. And that's really challenging. So what we do is iterate through this process in the middle, the 4 blocks. There's a lot of brainstorming that happens at the start, where you have to figure out what exactly your requirements are. And then you need to figure out if you can actually meet them. Sometimes it's just impossible to fit the tech that's required into a really small space. So we might have to revise requirements or come up with some awesome idea that no one had thought of before for how to make things smaller and pack it in. So then we'll go on and build alpha prototypes, and then we'll find problems with that, make it better, turn it into a beta prototype. And then we have to make sure that we've met all of our requirements and that the device we've built is safe for use. And after that, we can send it off to be manufactured. So here's an example of a product of ours that's on the market. It's a really fantastic idea of what KeyTech does and how we integrate all our disciplines together. So this is the GenMark ePlex device. It's a little bit hard to see the scale here, but this is easily the size of a desk in footprint. So it might be half the size of a refrigerator. It's really large, and what it does is take a biologic sample from a patient. So it might be blood or saliva, and we put it in this device, and it does some really complicated work with the DNA that's in that sample to diagnose various conditions. So on the left is an example of one of the cartridges that fits in the device. So it has 12 of them, 6 on each side, and there is a lot packed into it. This is one of those bays taken apart. It's a lot of parts. We have electronics, motors for moving fluid around, mechanisms for allowing cartridges to be loaded and unloaded, tiny fluid pathways that allow fluid to move throughout the cartridge to various heating stages and cooling stages. And that's how DNA is actually extracted and amplified and diagnosed. And then controlling all of that, we have lots and lots of software and firmware. So that's handling moving motors and heating things sensing what's happening with the fluid to make sure it's doing what we need it to do. And we can't forget user experience, because if we build this fantastic device, but it's really difficult to use, that's not too useful to someone. It might be so difficult to use that it's used incorrectly, or there's a safety issue for the patient. So thinking about how the scientist or the patient is going to use the device is extremely important in making something successful. So we do it by working really closely together. All of these disciplines are talking every day on all of our projects. And it's not just KeyTech. So KeyTech is great at doing the technology, but we have to talk with the scientists who came up with the idea, the client who's actually trying to sell the device, manufacturers who are going to put it on the market, users to make sure it meets their needs, and it has to be safe for everyone. So we work with the FDA as well. And all of that together allows us to build really cool products based on the awesome work that scientists are doing. And the idea is we're helping people in hospitals and at home to live better lives. So that's all I have, Philip.
Are you currently in the lab?
I am currently in the office.
In the office.
Yes, and we work in a really beautiful spot.
Mhm.
We're in the old McHenry Theater in Baltimore.
Very nice. We saw on the list of companies you work with Under Armour. Do you know what you did with Under Armour?
I don't, actually.
Okay.
That was before my time.
Okay. All right. Because they were sort of not a medical device or medically oriented company of the ones on the list. So I was just curious. Well, thank you very much for your presentation. It sounds like a lot of great work is being done at KeyTech. How long have you been with KeyTech?
About 2 years.
Okay, great. Well, thank you again for joining us tonight. And I'm going to now be turning the program over to Maria.
Hello, everybody.
And you're talking about, I guess, robotic arms that you print?
That's right. So 10 years ago, this Thanksgiving, there was a gentleman who had created a hand for a cosplay costume, had posted that on the internet to share the design. And it was seen by a gentleman who was a craftsman in South Africa. So these people on opposite sides of the world were using the internet to DIY or create their own prosthetic design. They created something that they shared with the community. The community stepped up to say that anybody who needed a hand, they would be happy to make and give away in order to follow the model of giving that Ivan Owen had set up when he had created his design and shared it open source. And so they introduced 3D printing to the craftsmen and to Ivan so that they were able to start innovating using a digital design. And then a young man, a 4-year-old, who lived close to the craftsman in South Africa, asked if he could have a hand. So they adjusted the design for these partial prosthetics for fingers, developed a hand, gave that to him, and then included him not only in creating that design, but in all the human-centered innovation or engineering. So that was another element that gave us the bedrock for our community, inclusive and human-centered rapid prototyping. 3D printing really lends itself to that. And so what I'd like to share with you is just very quickly some of the designs that have come from that, because we are including people who need the devices in the design. So if we can start with this very, very blocky hand, and you can see the triangle facets to this because it was designed in Blender. It was sort of push and pull for the design. If we go from that to this design, because you're including the people who are wearing the design, that inclusive sense of design is what gives us a really quick adjustment and the evolution of these designs. And then this one was next. So this is based on a 16 and 17-year-old who didn't like putting the elastic cords on their hands. Took time, and they didn't like pushing rope, so they used the elastics from their orthodontic bands. And just to show you, here we just have ordinary fishing line. This is 80-pound fishing line with a Teflon coating, something that could be found just about anywhere in the world. Very ordinary screws, again, something that you could find anywhere. You could use the elastic that you could find at the jewelry making counter in a craft shop, or easily available on the internet. So I'm just going to put one finger in here. This would be where you would put what was remaining from your hand, say, from here down. Sometimes when people are born, they are born without their fingers or parts of their hands due to their limbs being tangled in the bands in the amniotic fluid. And wherever that tangle occurs, there's no blood circulating beyond that point. And so they are born without their fingers or parts of their hands or arms. And so in order to compensate for that, they get to customize based on the designs that we share at the NIH 3D Print Exchange and other places, and so that anyone anywhere in the world would be able to create their 3D printed hand or arm. So I'm just going to hold this down as if it was strapped below my wrist, and by bending their wrist, they lengthen the cords here, and that shortens the cords at the fingertips. And that's what is able to give them a pinching grasp and able to allow them to pick things up and carry them and play with them. We also have some designs that are passively closed. So I'm going to show you, again, an evolution of a design from, this one's printed in nylon. It's very lightweight, but very durable. And so you could just insert something here, put the end of it here, and that would give you the ability to easily hold something like that. Whoops, let's try this again. There you go. So this first design doesn't have space between the fingers, but the second one, that was something that people wanted, because then they could put a glove over it that would match their skin tone, and then you could just print with the mismatched filaments, anything that was left over. So again, it was very economical. This design for an arm was very simple because you could pre-print the hand and the thumb as the only two pieces for the hand. There's a ring here. This is something that could ship flat. It's just laminated paper, but it was strong enough to be a forearm. So the only thing you needed to measure in order to adapt this to the wearer as a custom sized device was just this small ring of filament that would be easy to print quickly, even if you lived in a place where electricity was only available to you for a short period of time. So again, we're trying to optimize not only the ability to ship things to people who might not be able to print, but in places where they could print, to recognize that they were dealing with challenges because of their infrastructure or because it was a mobile project. So going from this and then learning from that, being able to put electronics inside so that you could have it adapt, so that you could tap this to have the device open and then shut to grasp something, and then to release it. And then going from these very human hands to redesigning the hand for a full arm. So this was very similar to the hand I just showed you, except that instead of having to flex the wrist in order to lengthen those cords, now you're flexing your elbow. And if the elbow wasn't available for lengthening those cords, you could attach this tensioner block sort of place where they were attaching the cords as an anchor there. You could, instead of putting that at below the wrist, put it on the opposite shoulder, so that by pushing that shoulder forward, you're using muscles opposite the side of, say, an injury. Or you could be, you're using also muscles that could be stronger, with the muscles of the waist and the shoulder, so that you'd be able to lengthen the cords across your back, and that would open and close the hands. So these were very simple designs to build. This hand was specifically designed to be built by children, people who might be in the second grade and up. And it's something also that is very easy to customize with changing the filaments, maybe using even filaments that might glow in the dark, might change in the sunlight, with using ultraviolet light as a trigger, or change with temperature. so that you'd be able to see when the fingertips change color that it might be too hot to drink. You don't need to touch it and burn yourself in order to get that feedback. People would be feeling the haptic feedback of the resistance from their fingertips, not at their fingertips like we do, but against the back of their hand. Because of the way that they're opening and closing their hands. So this was a great way for us to get started in applying robotics to accessibility and giving people the opportunity to also not only have things more accessible to them, but also to be able to express themselves and to consider prosthetics not just a medical device, but something that they could use as an accessory to become really good at something that they valued, or to look like something that they valued, like using the colors of their sports teams, or their Hogwarts house. So people of all ages are able to utilize the materials that you could get at, say, Micro Center or online from other filament companies to adapt these designs to something that they want to wear, they get excited about, and that art applied to the science, the technology, the engineering is always going to improve the outcome, because when they wear them more, they're building up the strength in their muscles, and also encouraging the body to develop stronger bones. We've even seen that with young people that they hit a growth spurt that they might never have had before in a limb that they hadn't used, and that they'll not only develop more muscle and bone, but that the arm will even lengthen. So one of the first kids that we worked with, his sleeves needed to be hemmed for his school uniforms, and after a couple of years, he didn't have to do that anymore. So for him, this device was also a great way for him to build his confidence. And so those are qualitative metrics that are just as important as the quantitative things that you could study, things that you could count and observe as well. So we're looking at the outcomes using both it's used research for qualitative and quantitative goals and outcomes. So it's possible for people to be engaged not only in the design and the upgrade of the engineering of this open source design, but also to be engaged in citizen science. So to ask if can a third grader, could a first grader create a medical device, a robotic hand? Absolutely. These are considered by the FDA Class 1 medical devices with exceptions. We are sharing everything open source. The code for the myoelectric designs that are picking up on the signals of the brain in order to activate the motors in them. Both the STL files or the OpenSCAD files are available from places like the NIH 3D Print Exchange and other repositories online, but also the code. And this community has continued to address other accessibility issues. And they've also looked at other designs for the upper limb. So there are exoskeleton designs, and there are also designs for the lower limb. So there is an expansion of this DIY health to include tools for people who are using these hands, or for people who have weakness and are recovering from, say, illness or injury. So they are able to utilize those tools. And then for people with vision impairments, people who are neurodiverse or are recovering from PTSD and need help with focus, there are all kinds of learning tools that are available to them that leverage the 3D printing and the sharing of these open source files and Creative Commons curriculum and guides in order for people to be able to have access to this around the world. So I'm just going to leave you with one other thought, and that's that 1/7 of all the devices that were given away around the world at one point came from children in the Baltimore, Washington area who had created the design, or the devices rather, in youth-led workshops. And so I want to let people know that at any age, you are able to engage in learning through service learning, and that this service learning is a very important way for us to leverage being able to help people in our community and being able to share the information around the world. If you would like to share the video that I had left with you, I'd be happy to just give people a minute if they have any questions to be able to put that in. But that'll give you a view of what a 3D printer looks like when it's printing the parts for these hands. Those prints would come off the printer and be cleaned up by for instance, Scouts. They love doing that, and then putting them together like the world's best Lego kit to assemble a hand. And the older kids are very good at cording them. It's also been really easy for us to be able to share this as a project around the world. I've just been putting, pencil cases together with really basic tools and some hand sanitizer so that they can get started. And I would like to invite everybody to join us.
Great. Well, we'll see if we have time at the end, because we have one more presenter and I want to make sure she has time to present her topic. If we have time, then we'll show it. If not, we'll certainly post on our website because it's a great video. So thank you very much, Maria, for all the work you're doing.
Thank you, everybody.
Oops. Our final speaker is Dr. Maura Melican from United Therapeutics, and she's going to be talking about 3D printing of lungs, I believe.
Yes, that's right. Is my audio working okay, Phil?
Your audio is working fine. Do you have anything you want to share, a PowerPoint or anything?
I don't have a PowerPoint, but I have a video that I can share afterwards that you can post as a link.
Okay, sounds good.
I will. Oh, do I have about 6 or 7 minutes to talk?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, wonderful. So what I'd like to tell you about is United Therapeutics and what my group within United Therapeutics has been doing since 2017. So I work at the Organ Manufacturing Group in Manchester, New Hampshire, where we are using SLA 3D printers to print lungs. And I have a model here to show you of a pig lung. So this is about the size and what it looks like with the supports and the vasculature that we put into the design. And I want to just take a few minutes to tell you about my group. So we are a group of about 25 scientists and mathematicians and engineers. I'm a biomedical engineer by training, and we are using human recombinant collagen and hydrogel polymers to print with 3D printers that are one of a kind. They are able to print the largest hydrogel structures. So this is a pig lung. And if you can imagine, the largest objects that we're going to be able to print are adult human-sized lungs. So that is one of the things that's unique about our 3D printers. And then the other thing that is unique is the resolution. So right now, the lungs that I'm currently printing are actually rabbit-sized lungs that have features that are about 25 microns in size. So those are both positive and negative features. And if you think about the size of cells, we are basically on the order of the size of cells. But the next generation printers that my group is going to be co-developing with our partner 3D Systems, they will have the ability to print micron-sized features. So our lung scaffolds will be able to have textures that guide the cells where we want them to go and help them remain lung cells like we want them to be. So let me just take a few minutes and tell you a little bit about my group. So we're broken into a couple of different functional groups within my team. We have a modeling team that is made up of a mathematician and a physicist, and they use the code, basically the program Mathematica, to make the code that generates the files that we use to print. And interestingly, when my company first began working on this in 2017, we were basically using techniques to basically look at histology, and we were looking at human lungs, and we were taking that information slice by slice, and then we were converting that into code and putting it into the 3D printers. But we quickly realized that the data sets to be able to print the ultimate objects that we wanted to print were going to be way too large. So the mathematician and the physicist that we hired and joined us have developed algorithms where they naturally space fill, both for airways, the branching of the trees, the airway trees in a lung, and also space filling the vascular trees. So this team basically writes the code and can make me a lung for a rabbit, which is currently what my team is implanting into animals. And we have taken, we started simple, and first we started just implanting vasculature, simple vasculature, a vascular graft. So that's as simple as it gets for 3D printing. We 3D printed a tube, and we were able to take rabbits out 6 months with these materials, these novel materials that we're using, and our grafts remained patent. And what that means is the blood didn't clot. So we were encouraged by these results, and what we did from there was we implanted more and more complex structures until we ended up with the entire left lung. So 2 lobes make up the left lung on the side of the rabbit, and we have rabbits living for 7 days on our United Therapeutics lungs. So it's very, very exciting work. And there's also a cellularization team that we have working on putting the different specialized cell types into our scaffolds before implantation. And the ultimate goal here is to end the organ shortage. So 1 organ at a time. We're focused on lungs first, as all of United Therapeutics is. And what we want to do is we want there to be basically a manufactured lung that can be ready and waiting for a patient, that can be we can basically take a biopsy of the person's lung tissue and take the cells from this biopsy and grow the cells up, fill the scaffold with the patient's own cells. And the lung that will be implanted will be one that we manufactured. So this would be an unlimited supply of organs. And that is the vision. And I think I used all my time. Phil, is there more time for me to keep talking, or do you have a question?
Yes, we'd love to hear a little bit more. It's a very fascinating work that you're doing up there. Sorry about that, my cat.
I see someone there with you. Okay, yeah. Let me think what else I can talk about. So let me tell you about the way that we sort of divide the project into parts. We have the modeling team that I talked about already. Then we have an ink team. So the bioink team is made up of chemists, polymer chemists, peptide chemists, and collagen specialists. So those people studied all sorts of things like materials. I myself am a biomaterials biomedical engineer, so I have materials as my expertise, and in particular, degradable, implantable biomaterials is what I basically studied in school. And that's been the focus of my entire career. And so the biomaterials team develops inks that are particular to each one of our printers. So when we first started, what we did was we took existing technology. So we looked and we saw that there were 3D printers that were capable of printing super high resolution objects, but the size of the objects was limited. So basically the vat size in the 3D printer was small enough, well, it was big enough, I should say. It was big enough to print a rabbit-sized lung, but not necessarily a human-sized lung. The 3D printers that could print larger structures like human-sized lungs had more limited resolution. So what we did was we brought different technologies together and worked with our partner 3D Systems, as I mentioned before. Now, 3D Systems is a company that's been around a very long time. It was founded by Chuck Hull, who is the father of 3D printing. And so Chuck is still involved. He's more peripherally involved right now, but he was involved in 2017 and used to come to our group meetings. And it was very, very exciting to work with someone like that in this field for me. So we have a 3D printing team that is inside our department. So they're United Therapeutics employees that take these 3D printers that are made, they are built to our specs, and then they further modify the machines. And what we're able to do is print the largest sized hydrogel structures with the finest resolution. So you'll hear others say that they can print things that are 25 microns in resolution, but those are out of rigid materials. This is using SLA to print hydrogels with micron resolution. which is pretty exciting. So we have the modeling team, we have the ink team, we have the printing team, we have the cellularization team, and then the team that I lead within my company is called the translational team. And the mission of my team in particular is to make sure that once these one-of-a-kind scaffolds, these precious scaffolds are printed, we are able to attach them, so integrate them into the animal and make sure that we're integrating them into the correct animal model. So that's what my team has been working on. And we're starting with rabbit and then moving into pig for our next set of studies. So Phil, that's what I have prepared. I also have a video that shows one of our objects being printed that I can send to you afterwards, maybe.
Absolutely. I'd love to see it. And it's very impressive work that you are and your team are doing. And we look forward to more coming out of your lab. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Milliken. So we do have time to show Maria's video. It's a short video related to the work she is doing. So let's show that, and then we will be wrapping up, if I can. So.
Nobody's perfect, don't you understand? We could all use a helping hand. Help a stranger or help a friend. We are all family in the end. You my bro, you my sister. Look at the bigger picture. No matter how big the issue, if you got somebody with you, lend a hand. You can fly like Peter Pan, and when you fly, I recommend you do not ever land, never ever land, no. Go for the extra mantras, it'll all be worthwhile. Look through the eyes of a child, greet every day with a smile. Seeing it, feeling it, no need for an epiphany. Simply go give others good energy, yeah. Nobody's perfect, don't you understand? We could all use a helping hand. Help a stranger or help a friend. We are all family in the end.
Hey, lend a hand, yeah. Lend a helping hand. Lend a hand, yeah. Lend a helping hand, yeah. Lend a hand, yeah. Lend a helping hand, yeah. Lend a hand, yeah. Lend a helping hand, yeah. I'ma lend a hand, yeah. I'ma help all of my friends, yeah. Mama taught me how to be a good man, yeah. So all my haters, I'ma even help them, yeah. We good Samaritans, ain't no room for no arrogance. Just good vibes and good times from LA out to Maryland. Good vibes can't get killed, looking so happy you would've thought I was for real, for real. They say laughter's the best way to heal, cause all of the joy that it makes you feel. You are you and I am me, you do you so beautifully. So we all sing jubilees, they true to you but I'm true to me.
Nobody's perfect, don't you understand? We could all use a helping hand. Help a stranger or help a friend. We are all family in the end. Nobody's perfect, don't you understand? We could all use a helping hand. Help a stranger or help a friend. We are all family in the end.
Hey, lend a hand, yeah. Lend a helping hand. Lend a hand, yeah. Lend a helping hand, yeah. Lend a hand, yeah. Lend a helping hand, yeah. Lend a hand, yeah. Lend a helping hand, yeah.
Well, I think that was a very inspirational way to end the program. Do you want to have a final comment on that, Maria, before we wrap things up?
I want to tell everybody that the December 3rd is 3D Day. And so that whole week we consider 3D week. There are people all over the country who are going to be hosting their projects and workshops that have to do with 3D, including healthcare and robotics. I am so thrilled to hear about the stuff that people shared today. And I just want to say also that 4D, that is designing and 3D printing, anticipating changes over time, is also part of that whole 3D week. So I'd like to invite everybody to do that. If anybody wants to build hands with us, I can get kits to them. And I really hope that people will join us. 3D Day is special to us because it's also the International Day for People with Disabilities. Thanks very much. And I appreciate being able to share with everybody. This is a really wonderful panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. And thank you, everybody who joined us today. Yes, everybody who has spoken tonight, presented, is doing amazing work and very inspirational work. And we look forward to the use of and the new developments that everybody on the panel is working on. So again, thank you very much for joining us. We will be posting this shortly so that we can share this so that people who are not able to see it tonight will be able to watch it in the future and learn of the amazing things that are going on in the healthcare field. Thank you very much. Have a great evening.